Okay, today's video is going to be a review of graphing and writing the equation of the line. So if you've watched video 3.1 and video 3.2, this is kind of putting it all together and reviewing you to get you ready for your next quiz. So it's really nothing new. So the first thing we're going to be doing is graphing. And so there's really 4 different types of graphs you can have. And so depending on what the graph looks like is how you'll want to solve it. So we learned to solve by x and y intercepts, by slope intercept, and then these are just your x equals and your y equals. So let's look back at our formulas. You can print these out and have them on your desk when you're working on these if you want to. But if there's something in the form of slope-intercept where it's y equals x plus number, then you can graph it just by looking at it, because when it's in this form, this is your y-intercept and this is your slope. So when you look at these 4 graphs, this is the one that looks just like slope-intercept. And because that looks just like this, that tells me that this is my b and this is my slope. So this one we can graph by just looking at it. This tells us we're going to go to 0.4 on the, this is my y-intercept. So I'm going to go to 4 on the y-axis, which is right here. And then my slope is -1/3, which remember slope is rise over run. So negative you would go down into the right, positive you would go up into the right. So I'm going to start here, and then the -1 tells me to go down 1, and then the 3 on the bottom tells me to go right 3. And then 2 points make a line. So I'm done. If you're really confused about that, watch video 3.1 because I go in deep detail about how to graph by slope intercept. But if we look at this graph, it doesn't look like this. It's not in the form y equals mx plus b. So you could solve it for y and graph just like we did the second one, but that's a lot of work. So let's look at graphing it by x and y intercepts. So when it's not solved for y, you want to make an xy chart with your 0 and 0. Again, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go back and look at video 3.1. And so when it's not solved for y, we can do our x and y intercepts. So when x is 0, cover up your x value. And then we have 6 divided by -3 is -2. And then when y is 0, cover up your y value. So I have 6 divided by 2 is 3. And so these are our 2 points. We have the point 0, -2, which means 0 on the x-axis and down to -2 on the y. And then we have the point 30, which means 3 on the x-axis, 0 on the y. And so 2 points make a line. So if it is solved for y, then do slope-intercept. If it's not solved for y, do your xy chart. Okay, then these next 2 are kind of the special cases. Let's do this one first. So y equals -3, I can't do an xy chart. It's not in y equals mx plus b. So these are where you just go to y equals -3. And you have to remember, this is your y-axis, this is your x. So we go to -3 on the y-axis and draw a perpendicular line. You can't draw up and down line because it would be the y-axis. So you draw it perpendicular to the y-axis. And that's all you have to do for that one. This one, again, I can't put it in slope-intercept. I can't do an xy because it only has an x, but it's not by itself. So for this one, first I have to solve for x by minusing my 2 and getting x equals 5. And now I can go to 5 on the x-axis and draw a perpendicular line. And that's really the only 4 types of graphs that you'll have on the test and on your graphing worksheet in your quiz grade. Okay, then let's review writing the equation of the line. So again, we need our little formulas here. And so you're going to write the equation line depending on what they give you. So this first one gave me an m is 2/3 and b is -3. So I look at my formulas, which one needs m and b? This y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to plug it in, y equals mx plus b, where it's y equals m is 2/3 x minus 3, because b is -3, and that's the equation of the line. This next one, I have a slope and I have the point 0.04. Now I could use slope-intercept down here. Whoops, let me show that right there. But because this is a 0, and in our formula, y-intercept is 0 some number, this one you can always also use a shortcut because you know that this is b. Now that's only happens because of the 0 here. When you look at these down here, they don't have zeros, so you can't use the shortcut on those. You can only use it when it has a 0 on the first line. So that means we're going to use that y equals mx plus b again. So y would equal 2/3 x plus 4 because b is a positive 4. Now these next two are those special cases that I tell you on the video to write stars by because you really want to memorize them. And so you should just hopefully memorize that 0 is y equals and undefined is x equals. Let me pull this back up. I use this in another video. But just kind of ignore this right here. But because a vertical line always crosses the x-axis and the slope for this vertical line is undefined, then an undefined is always x equals some number. And 0 is always a flat line which crosses the y-axis. So 0 is always y equals. Again, I go up through this in more detail in the 3.1 video. But what I was really writing right here is one of the ways I think to memorize is I think of undefined as crossing out that 0, which makes me think of the x equals. So undefined is x, 0 is y. So when we're looking at our worksheet, slope equals 0. 0 is always y equals. Now you do have to look here. Remember the first number is your x and the second number is your y. So y would equal 5. And that's our equation, because see, it's a problem like this one up here if you were to graph it. Whoops. It's the equation of the line of a horizontal line. And then this next one, slope undefined. Undefined is always x equals, and what's my x value? 3. The nice thing when you have them right next to each other, you can also use these graphs up here because slope 0 means it's flat, and which one was that? Y equals. Undefined was vertical, and what was it? X equals. So you can always use those to help you also if you need to. So the first 4 are pretty quick and easy, but these last ones are going to take some work. So let me get this in here. Let's see. Do them side by side. Yeah, there we go. Okay, these last two though gives you a slope of -1/3 and the point -5/2. I cannot use this one because there's not a 0, so I have to use the point slope formula. So for these, you have to use that y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. And it even says here on your formula that your point is x1, y1, and your slope is m. So we're just going to plug that in. So y minus y sub 1 is 2 equals m is a -1/3 parentheses x minus a -5 is a plus 5. Now these are from 3.2 video. So again, if you're lost on these, go back and watch the 3.2 video because I go over them in depth. So you plug in. Remember, it's always the opposite when it goes into the formula. And now I got to solve for y, so I need to get rid of my fraction. Step 1, get rid of your fraction by multiplying everything by 3. So it makes this a 3y minus 6 equals, those would cancel, leaving me that -1 on top. Don't forget you have the whole number there on top. Bring down the x plus 5. So step 1, we got rid of our fraction. Step 2, get rid of our parentheses. So I'm going to distribute the -1x minus 5. Because negative times a positive is a negative. I need to get my y by itself, so I'm going to move my 6 over. So I get a 3y equals a -1x plus 1. And then step 6 is divide by the number in front, so I have to do it to everything. So the final answer here is y equals a -1/3 x plus 1/3. You just leave it like a fraction. Okay, and then this last one. Here we want to write the equation of line through 2 points. Well, you can't plug 2 points into any of these formulas. And for this one, we've got to have a slope, so we can find a slope using this formula up here, this y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So this one actually has two parts. First, you find the slope, and then you plug it in that y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus, x sub 1. So to find the slope, we're going to use this formula, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Be careful to start with your two negatives because it's really important to have those in place before you plug in. And again, if you're lost right here, stop and go back and watch the 3.2 video because that's what covers writing the equation of the line. So we're going to plug in, so you label them. This is your x1, y1, your first x and y, and this is your x2, y2, your second x and y. So now we're going to plug them in. So y sub 2 is 4. Y sub 1 is negative 2. Do you see why it's important? You already had that because two negatives make a positive, leaving me a 6 on the top. And then on the bottom, x sub 2 is 5 and x sub 1 is 2. So 5 minus 2 is 3. Now be sure and simplify this. You could get the right answer by putting that fraction in, but it's a whole lot more work. You want to simplify this and say 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that's going to be my m. So always simplify that fraction if you can. But we're not finished. All we did is find the slope. So now we have to plug that slope back in this formula up here. And you can use either point. I just always use the first one because we already labeled it x1, y1. And so we're going to plug it in. So it's going to be y minus a negative 2 makes that a plus 2 equals m is 2. I just realized all these are 2's. And then x minus x sub 1 is 2. It doesn't always work out that they're all the same number. That was just a fluke. Okay, we don't have a fraction, so that's good. We don't have to get rid of a fraction, but we do have to get rid of our parentheses. So we're going to distribute and get y plus 2 equals 2x minus 4. And then to get y by itself, I'm going to subtract my 2. So y equals 2x minus 6. And that's your final answer. So you notice they're all in equation of the line form. And these are those special cases, y equals x equals. So the first four are 3.1. You can go back and get further detail on those in 3.1. And the last ones are 3.2. So that's just a review of graphing and writing the equation of the line.